Okay, hello and welcome everyone. We'll just, before we get into the session, we'll just give it a few moments for people to join the room. Okay then. All right, I think we'll make a start. Of course, more people will join over the next few minutes or so. Hello and welcome. My name is Rupert Liddington. I'm Senior Marketing and Recruitment Officer here at Alliance Manchester Business School. Again, a big welcome and thank you for giving up your time to join this Professional MBA info session or webinar. We have nearly 100 registered to this session, which is fantastic, and that's actually across 22 different countries, which is excellent. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're tuning in today. And yes, just a few more introductions. We are, of course, joined by some other colleagues. We have my colleague Katerina Clark, who's Marketing and Recruitment Coordinator. She'll be helping with this session today. Of course, we have Xavier Duran, who's Director of MBA Programmes here at the Business School. So between the three of us, we've got all things covered. Before I hand over to Xavier, who will be delivering the main topic of the session, just a bit about the format and the running order today. This is, as I mentioned, and you'll see from the information around the session, it is a professional MBA session. So we are covering all of the part-time and flexible MBAs that we offer here at Alliance Manchester Business School. So that will be our 2-year global MBA, including the Global Finance Accelerated MBA and our 18-month Global Executive MBA. Of course, we offer a full-time program as well. So if your interests lie in that, we'll ask you to join us next week. We are running a very similar session online for any candidates who are interested in the full-time program, and you can register for that via our website. It is a 1-hour session today, and we will be talking about the programs for about 40 minutes and then opening for questions as well. We do encourage it to be an engaging session, so we do, of course, welcome your questions. You can do that by typing them into the questions box, which will be at the bottom of your Zoom interface. Now, if you have questions about Xavier's session, i.e. the programs, the curriculum, the different MBA options we're having, do type them in as we progress through the session. Any questions around admissions, the application process, stuff like that, myself and Katerina will be addressing those questions in the last 10 minutes of the session. So do hold on and type them in when you're prompted to do so. Xavier will also be utilizing the chat function as well at certain points in his presentation. So do look out for invitations to comment as we go along. Okay, I think I've said enough, so I might use this opportunity to welcome Xavier to the conversation.
Okay, thank you, Rupert. And indeed, a good afternoon to everybody. If you are here in Manchester or indeed in other parts of the UK or Europe, good morning. If you happen to be in the Americas, I think there might be a few participants from that region, and certainly as well, good evening if you're coming from different parts of the Middle East or the Far East. I'd assume that most of our applicants or inquiries from the Far East are possibly attending similar sessions that we might be hosting from our international centers in Shanghai and Hong Kong and Singapore, and likewise for the Middle East from our Dubai center. But nonetheless, from time to time, we also have people from those regions attending the sessions that we host here from Manchester in itself. But as Rupert said, my name is Xavier Duran, and I'm the MBA Programmes Director here at Alliance Manchester Business School. And as such, I have oversight over our portfolio of MBA programs at the Business School. So obviously our full-time MBA program, and indeed as well our portfolio of professional MBAs, which, as Rupert mentioned, includes our global MBA program, which is our largest pathway of professional MBAs, and indeed as well the finance accelerated pathway through our global MBA for holders of professional qualifications on accounting and finance, so CIMAs, CPAs, ACCA, and so on, and indeed as well our global executive MBA. I will focus today's talk on both our global MBA program, which, as I said, is our largest program, usually taking anywhere between 500 and 600 students worldwide every year in 2 intakes a year, so every July and every January. And I will also speak about our Global Executive MBA, which is quite smaller, taking anywhere between 40 and 60 students every year, again, in 2 intakes yearly, every July and every January. So what I will do is I will start off by perhaps telling you a bit about the University of Manchester and Alliance Manchester Business School, which are the universities that host our professional MBA programs. So I'm sure if you got to this point and you're joining this session, you've possibly done a bit of research about our institution. You're possibly aware that the University of Manchester is an incredibly large and reputable institution. So we have over 45,000 students in our university. University is made up of 3 main faculties. So we have a faculty of biology and life sciences, medicine, and so on. We've got the faculty of engineering and material science, and then obviously we have faculty of humanities. And it is within this faculty of humanities that we have Alliance Manchester Business School, along with a School of Social Sciences, a School of Development, Education, and another school for the arts, languages, and cultural studies, so SALT basically. But the Alliance Manchester Business School in itself is the largest school within the Faculty of Humanities, and indeed as well, we are one of the largest business schools in the United Kingdom, in what is one of the largest universities, again, in the United Kingdom. As it happens, we are the largest single-site university in the United Kingdom. You might be wondering, what do you mean by the largest site university in the United Kingdom? Why do you have to caveat this? Well, there are possibly other institutions that might be slightly larger than us. There is certainly the Open University that by number of students is larger than us, but that's not a university in the traditional sense of having full-time campus students. And certainly the University of London is a very, very large institution as well, but it's perhaps more of a federated university with a large number of affiliated institutions, anywhere from the London School of Economics to the London School of Tropical Medicine to other smaller institutions, all of them with their own ethos and their own traditions that are simply federated under the larger umbrella of the University of London. So on a traditional sense, as a single site university, the University of Manchester is the largest single site university here in the United Kingdom. Very reputable institution. We've been around for a long time. All our collateral already mentions it, that we were established in 1824. That's actually quite a relevant date, because obviously that in essence tells you that if you are to join our institution, say next July or next January, you will be very much so part of our very prominent bicentennial celebrations. We will be celebrating our 200th anniversary very, very soon next year, and obviously the university is preparing big celebrations here in Manchester, but indeed as well nationally and internationally. We've got upwards to 25 Nobel Prize winners amongst our staff, old and present, and indeed as well amongst our students, and plenty of the types of things you would have studied perhaps during school or secondary school, wherever you are, or indeed in college as well, are down to scientists and researchers that have been part of our university. Anything from having the first computer here in Manchester. I'm sure you've actually heard about Alan Turing, who used to be one of the academics here at the University of Manchester, to the fact that the atom was actually split for the first time here in Manchester. So a lot of developments on nuclear physics and material science. Obviously, you've heard of the development of graphene technology by our most recent Nobel Prizes, so Kim and Novoselov. Perhaps closer to the business school in the Faculty of Humanities, we've actually had affiliations, obviously, with Stiglitz, a Nobel Prize in Economics, not that long ago, and obviously also a advisor to the Clinton administration. So plenty of prominence amongst our staff and students. Perhaps closer to our MBA programs, we are highly ranked at a number of levels. So we are the 5th in the UK, or certainly our full-time program is, and we are ranked amongst the top 50 schools in the world. And we've got the accolade of being the first school ranked in terms of ESG and CSR in the United Kingdom, since we actually tend to give prominence to these type of issues in our MBA portfolio. And before I possibly move on to speaking about our programs in a bit more detail, I'd like you perhaps to use the chat box function to tell me, first of all, what is your understanding of what an MBA is? So you might see at the bottom or the top of your screens that there's a Q&A functionality where you can actually ask any questions that you may have about our programs, but there's also a chat box. Can I please ask you to type in what do you think an MBA is? What does an MBA do? Beyond the obvious, an MBA is a Master of Business Administration, but what is, in your opinion, an MBA? And don't be shy, just share your thoughts on the chat box. So Victoria is telling us there is a way to accelerate one's career. Absolutely. So Chris is telling us that it provides us with a holistic view or a general business model from top to bottom of an organization. Absolutely, I agree with you as well, Chris. Anyone else? Anyone, guys, please, don't be shy. So Robert tells us that it's the advanced study of business theory and practice to help take professionals to the next level. Absolutely. So continue providing us with your thoughts. But notice a trend emerging here. People telling us that it's about running organizations. People telling us that it's also about looking at individual managers. So it's both about organizations and managers. Rebecca here is telling us that it allows us to get a view on strategy. Absolutely. And Stephen here tells us that it's the pinnacle of business education. I'm not sure whether it's the pinnacle or not, but certainly it tends to be the business management qualification par excellence, and it tends to, in essence, be viewed quite favorably by applicants and employers alike the world over. So it's actually quite a popular qualification here in the UK, but certainly in the United States and in parts of Asia, the Middle East, Africa, South America, Australia, and so on. So it's a very well-known qualification, absolutely. Alistair is telling us that it gives us an understanding of how businesses are run from a startup to enterprise. In essence, yes, you can be looking at it from a startup perspective, so looking at the entrepreneurial side of things, or indeed you can actually be looking at it from a more well-established perspective, looking at big MNCs and well-established corporations. Absolutely. Alessia here tells us that it is about getting insights into global perspectives on how to build global relationships effectively. Chris tells us that it provides us with a chance to enhance and broaden our business knowledge to accelerate or to augment our specialism. Absolutely, guys, you're all totally right and spot on the comments that you're actually making. An MBA or a Master in Business Administration is without a doubt what we call a generic business and management qualification. And notice here that whilst I'm using those words, broad and generic, I'm not using them in any pejorative sense whatsoever, quite the opposite. I'm actually trying to bring out the fact that the generality that an MBA provides is indeed what most people, both applicants and employers alike, are actually really looking for out of MBA graduates. So in essence, you may have gone through undergraduate programs, or you might be coming through an experiential route, whatever your background is. But usually, if you want to go into a master's level education, there are two routes really when it comes to business management education. So you can actually go the MSc route when you want to perhaps get a lot more expertise in a very, very niche or a very specialist area. So you can do, for example, an MSc in economics or an MSc in operations management, marketing, perhaps on finance, perhaps on accounting. It might well be that you want to specialize on HR, organizational behavior, organizational design. But in essence, an MSc is actually funneling you into an area of expertise. You become more and more expert in a very small niche or in a very small area of business and management. The MBA is the opposite. The MBA is actually aimed at an audience that is post-experience. So we're looking at people that most likely, like you, are anywhere between your mid to late 20s to mid 40s. You've possibly been quite successful at climbing through the ranks within your organization, but possibly in a rather specialist function. So you're good marketers, you're good engineers, you are good people in finance or in operations. You might well come from a very specific industry like healthcare. You might even have a medical background. You might be a scientist. You might be in project management. You might be in the military. But what the MBA does is it takes you away from that very, very specific area of expertise, and it allows you, rather than funneling into an area of expertise, it takes you out of that area of expertise and makes you a broad, a more generic thinker. In essence, sometimes the organization starts pigeonholing you into a very, very specific area, and it becomes incredibly difficult for you to break away from that glass ceiling, from that pigeonhole you've been placed in, and try to perhaps get others to think of you as a more generalist manager, somebody that can take that helicopter view that will allow you to look at strategy, or looking at a more comprehensive or more holistic view of the organization, perhaps starting to get towards position closer to board level, and looking perhaps at the synergies and the interdependencies between different business functions. So what we will do in an MBA is, in essence, look both at how organizations generally work. And here I'm actually, again, trying to bring out that word generally. We're actually getting you to look at every single area within the organization. You'll have to study operations. You will start looking at marketing. You will be starting to look at finance, accounting. You will be doing economics. You'll be going to be looking at human resource management, and so on. You will not become an expert on any of those areas. You'll just about be able to get enough knowledge about each one of those areas to know what people on those functions in those departments are doing. You will be able to comfortably deal with the type of issues that they speak about. May that be the type of pricing decisions or advertising decisions they do in marketing, or interpreting variance analysis, or income statements in the finance or in the accounting department, understanding how we go about looking at more effective and more efficient processes if we look at the operations department within your business, and so on. But we're not trying to make you an expert on any of them. We're just getting you to understand organizations more holistically. And only once we've actually done that, we'll get you to take that possibly a step forward by looking at the organization from above. So I said earlier, by taking that helicopter view that will allow you to look at the interdependencies, at the tensions between all those different functional areas within the organization, and prepare and implement strategy at the higher level. Not only that, but yeah, there's still a possibility for you to perhaps tailor and customize the MBA journey in whichever way you want to be steering your career towards. So of course, through a choice of electives, you can always steer it towards finance, towards the digital world, towards owning your own skills, looking, for example, at negotiations, or at looking at emotional intelligence in a work psychology for managerial success type elective, and whether you want to be looking at strategy or at marketing or operations. So plenty of opportunities for you to customize. But in essence, ours, and indeed in the vast majority of MBAs that will be triply accredited, will be always offering you first a view of the different functions within the organization, and then they will bring them together in the form of a strategy course. That to do with the organization. However, not only we're looking at organizations, as I said earlier, we're also looking at how to develop you as individual managers, as people. So how you go about developing your skills, anything from being able to communicate more effectively, being able to collaborate with others. That might be anything from being able to delegate, to being able to exert more productivity out of employees, being able to perhaps at an entrepreneurial level come together as a team of individuals to try to fundraise as a collective, and indeed as well other type of general skills that might be very crucial. At the end of the day, we're still a program of studies, critical thinking, and indeed as well trying to increase your level of creativity, and most importantly, trying to make you more confident as individuals. Actually, this is quite an interesting one, because vast majority of people, when we ask them what motivates you to pursue an MBA, a lot of people tend to allude to professional reasons. Or, as I said, I want to become more of a generalist. I want my organization to see me beyond an engineer. I want my colleagues to respect me more. In other words, I want to be able to come across as a more diligent or as a more emphatic individual. I want to learn how to prioritize. I want to learn how to present. I want to learn all those type of skills. But ultimately, once we actually ask the same question, so what is it that you got out of the MBA? Towards the end of your MBA journeys, or indeed from our graduates, the very first thing they tell us is that the MBA gives them a lot of confidence. And confidence here, not necessarily in the sense of being the really able individual to stand in front of a big theater with thousands of people and being able to crack up a couple of jokes. Not only that, but confident perhaps in your ability to negotiate your own salary, in your ability to be self-assured in your capabilities and being able to change sector completely, or change the type of job that you do, or perhaps simply just confident on the opportunities that come out of uncertainty. So rather than fearing uncertainty and the future, embrace it as one that is actually full of opportunities, because it is usually when there is change, it is usually when there's uncertainty, that lots of opportunities are actually open. Certainly for MBAs that tend to be quite generalist, that can seize those opportunities because they're not pigeonholed into a small area. Okay, so the key to MBAs lies in its generality, in its broadness, and this is incredibly important. So now, I think now we know what an MBA is about. What is it? And again, I'm going to ask you to do this exercise again in the chat box. What is it that you guys are looking for out of an MBA? Can you share it with us? So use the chat box again and let us know, what is it that you're looking for in an MBA? What motivates you to do an MBA? And I've given you a couple of hints already. So go ahead. Are you going shy? Come on, everybody could tell us what an MBA was about. Now tell us, what is it that motivates people to do an MBA? Good networking, absolutely. So we're putting you together with like-minded individuals, people with a certain level of ambition, people that might want to set up their own businesses, people that want to get better professional outcomes. And we provide for that forum like-minded people, absolutely. Alistair tells us career progression and personal development. Taimi actually took a hint from what I said in telling us that an MBA will actually give us confidence. Absolutely. Robert tells us that it gives us courage and confidence to step out of a specialist area, precisely as we said. Rebecca is telling us the big elephant in the room. Usually, yes, an MBA can translate into higher salaries and higher income. Absolutely. Not necessarily, but quite often it does, yes. Alessia, and I hope I'm actually pronouncing your name properly there, tells us that it allows us to be confident and to develop new ventures or startups, absolutely, change our careers, enhance leadership, and to be able to speak with other areas of business and have that fruitful conversation that will support Chris, in this case, in his goal to make it to C-suite. Absolutely, guys. And even if you are not sure of what tends to motivate people to doing an MBA, I have them here in the slide. You've already mentioned many of them. It attracts individuals that are quite ambitious, that are looking to transform their career, whether it is because they want to go further up, so they want to get promotions or they want to have positions with more responsibility, or perhaps because they want to set up their own businesses, or indeed, so more often than we used to in the past, we're actually getting a lot of traction with entrepreneurs or wannabe entrepreneurs that use the MBA as a platform to test out their ideas, and certainly as well, perhaps even just to network with like-minded individuals with whom they can actually partner to set up new business ventures, or indeed sometimes just to change their career completely. It's not necessarily just to get to higher positions within their functions or within their organizations, but to perhaps change industry, change country, and change line of business altogether. I think it's actually quite reasonable to say that the vast majority of people that do an MBA will do it for professional reasons. And you might be wondering why you're saying most and not everybody. We still have people that will join our MBAs for intellectual stimulation, or we have people that are incredibly senior, that have been there, done that sort of thing, that have basically arrived at the pinnacle of business. And they're people that are self-made, never went to college, never had any formal studies, and they simply arrive at an older age where they've basically done it all. We've got a few of them well into their 50s and 60s that say, you know what, I'd just like to get an MBA simply just to prove to myself that beyond my success in business and in management, I can, in essence, also accomplish a program of studies, or I can actually really back up what I think I've been able to apply through my career into a more formal program of studies. So there's an element of that as well. You'd be surprised to hear. I've already spoken about the fact that it's a generalist or a broad business management qualification, and indeed it provides us with a source of networking opportunities. And what's actually quite perhaps unique to our program, and certainly to our professional MBA, so the global MBA and indeed as well the global executive MBA, is that we actually provide for a very, very global set of opportunities. So perhaps more so than other MBAs, and that's at the end of the day one of our key USPs here in Manchester, is the fact that in providing our global and our global executive MBAs through our network of international centers, so by having a very strong transnational education presence all over the world, we are not only offering global opportunities that come about having a very international makeup of a student population. So we will typically have more than 80 or 90 nationalities represented in each one of our intakes, typically coming from all over the world. And obviously the fact that if you join our programs, so say, for example, if you're in our global MBA program, as I will speak about later, you can go and take your electives, not only here in Manchester, but you can take them in Hong Kong, in Singapore, in Shanghai, in Dubai, at one of our international centers. If you want, you can obviously stay here. And just as we allow you to go to centers, we allow other people from centers to come to Manchester. So even if you don't reach out to the world will reach out to you at elective. Or the Global Executive MBA, we already dictate the fact that you need to travel around our network of centers as part of the program. But beyond that, you will notice as well that our curriculum tends to be incredibly global. So we don't tend to localize it to the areas where we deliver it. So if you're looking for an MBA that is incredibly UK based, this is not the MBA for you. I'll be frank with you. We tend to focus a lot on MNCs. We tend to focus a lot on an international dimension and global business issues. So it's incredibly global. That's why we call it the global MBA program, the Global Executive MBA. So the curricular level is incredibly global. And even the makeup of our faculty, starting with myself, as you can tell, I've got a Spanish accent. The vast majority of people that will be teaching you come from every single corner of the world. So we tend to rely on academics and practitioners that are incredibly international. So that's ultimately an incredibly global program. Let me move on then to allude to some of the different formats that are out there in terms of MBA programs that you can actually take from us or indeed from other institutions. And you're possibly baffled at this stage if you're thinking of doing an MBA with regards to the type of MBAs that are out there. You'll be hearing about executive MBAs, part-time MBAs, distance MBAs, online MBAs. At the end of the day, there's such a wide proliferation of MBA delivery formats that sometimes it's actually difficult to know which one to choose from. So you will notice that traditional executive type MBAs tend to be pitched at quite a local level. And the reason being that usually they will be attracting people that take an executive MBA with upwards to 70 or 90 days face-to-face teaching, but obviously that really restricts the students from being able to tap into a very international pool of applicants, simply because to make that possible with so much face-to-face time, you'll be asked possibly to attend classes a couple of evenings every week or a couple of weekends every month. And obviously you won't be able to be traveling to international destinations when frequent input is required of you. If you're looking for a lot of constancy, if you're looking for engaging with your stories literally on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, then perhaps this type of programs are actually for you. You might, on the other side of the spectrum, hear of programs that are online. Yeah, they're offered completely online. And if that's what you want, that's absolutely okay. They will offer you that knowledge. They will offer you the 3 letters at the end of your name. But at the end of the day, one of the things that you're crucially missing out there is that contact with academics and, most importantly, the networking that the MBA can provide you. So face-to-face tends to be incredibly useful. In between, you might have those traditional distance learning MBAs, which will be quite modular and that will offer an average between 10 and 14 days on the space, usually of around 2 years for part-time MBAs. Or you will have then something in between that and those traditional executive MBAs that will be asking you to come for quite frequent periods of times, whether that's evenings or weekends, close to home, on what will be possibly rather local MBA type programs. What we do is slightly different. So what we're trying to look for is not only for a global dimension, but we're also trying to make our programs incredibly flexible. So what we do is we offer a blended program. In other words, we blend both face-to-face with online components for each one of our courses that will give you, hopefully, as much face-to-face times with our academics and possibilities to network with like-minded individuals, at the same time as giving you the flexibility to not having to come every weekend or every couple of evenings to our program. So what we do is we tend to put all those face-to-face interventions into what we call workshop residentials that happen on average around 3 times a year. And I'm not going to lie about this. Our workshop residentials are incredibly intense. So in essence, a workshop for any course on average tends to be around 3 days. And what you do is basically get around 24, 25 hours of contact time with your academics, usually in a small class setting. We don't tend to put more than 30 people in any one class ever, because we tend to rely a lot on discussion, on debate, and trying to draw from the experience that our delegates at our MBA classes bring into the discussion. Okay, but in essence, for every single class, you'll be getting around 24, 25 hours of tuition, which is actually quite close to what our full-time MBAs would be getting here in Manchester, with the difference that we do it in very, very, very intense and short periods of time. Now, of course, there is plenty of assumptions of work that will have to happen before those workshops and after those workshops. But I think it's actually fair to say, as program director, that usually that intensity tends to be very, very high during the workshop residential. So we're just asking you to step out of your job and your private lives basically for a week, and to breathe your MBA, and to really, really, really being able to focus on the MBA for shorter periods of time, but very, very intense period of time, usually 3 times a year. So very quickly, as I said, we have mainly two versions of our professional MBA. So we've got our larger program, what we call our global MBA, which in its standard form is 24 months in duration. And there's an accelerated route through it, as I said earlier, which we call the Global Finance Accelerated for finance and accounting professionals. In other words, if you've got an ACCA or a CIMA or a CPA type or a CFA type qualification, we will give you exemptions on our business accounting and finance course, which allow you, in essence, to make it a bit shorter. You would be joining our Manchester cohort for our core units. So in essence, you would be coming a number of times to Manchester, and then you would be having the possibility of going to any of our international centers, or here in Manchester, as I said earlier, for your elective courses. This is aimed at people with a minimum of 3 years professional experience. However, that's a very, very, very bare minimum. I think it's fair to say that hardly anybody in our global MBA program would have, if anybody really, would have 3 years experience. At the end of the day, the average age of our students is 36. So you can really do the sum. Our Global Executive MBA, on the other hand, is a program that is 18 months in duration, is a very, very closed cohort of individuals. So it doesn't have the flexibility for you to drop in and out, and perhaps going to the different centers when and as you please, but we actually dictate where you go. But what we're actually trying to do here is we're trying to cherry pick a very, very senior cohort. So usually looking at people with significant managerial experience, people that are already at board level or that are nearing board level, that will come as a very close cohort of individuals, maximum 30 per intake, and will be going around the world together. First to Manchester, then they will be going to Singapore, then they will be going to Dubai, only before they come back to Manchester for the strategy and business inquiry briefing, and then they will take their electives anywhere they want in the world, or here in Manchester. Quickly to guide you through each one of these programs, and certainly through the structures. Again, just a couple of snippets of our global MBA. As I said, our largest program. We tend to take, as I said, anywhere between 400, well, usually it's more 500 and 600 students every year. The program is 24 months in duration. We have 2 intakes every year, one in July and one in January. That will include upwards to 29 days of face-to-face tuition. As I said, you will be taking your core courses in the form of workshops here in Manchester, and then you can take the electives basically wherever you want in the form of 6 residentials, so 3 residentials every year. It includes 3 electives, but also important to note, because people tend to love our electives. At any point in time, we have anywhere between 23, 24, 25, 26 electives. We tend to change them often enough to really reflect what our students and our employers want. But in essence, what we also give you is a complimentary elective once you actually graduate successfully from our program. And in essence is what we do to try to get you to commit to a philosophy of lifelong learning. So not to think that once you complete your MBA, that's it, tick the box, you're done with your learning journey. Learning journey should actually continue into the future, and obviously give you that opportunity to again take another elective as part of it. So in essence, you could even think of it as a 32-day program, if you will. But of course, you have that choice to take it up or not once you finish the program. I think I already mentioned 36 is our average age. In our last intake here in Manchester, I think we had up to 68 nationalities, a rather high average years of experience, and usually our global MBAs will have an average of 6 years managerial experience. What are our key USPs? I think I already mentioned the 2 key USPs. The fact that it's an incredibly global program by virtue of the makeup of our student body, our faculty body, and indeed as well from a curricular perspective, and the fact that it is incredibly, incredibly flexible. Okay. How does the structure look like? I think I've already pretty much given you a high-level sense of how MBA programs look like. So remember, usually at the very start, you will be starting to look at your courses on operations management, on marketing, on economics, on organizational behavior, organizational design, human resource management, accounting, finance, and so on. And this is in essence what you do in the very first year. So you look at your core knowledge and skills as to how organizations work and how you should be looking at yourself as an individual. And it's only then towards the end of the MBA, so in essence on the second year, that you take that helicopter view through the use of a strategy course that basically brings it all together. And then you actually customize your journey via the choice of your electives and what we call a life business project, in other words, customize as well your journey by looking at a dissertation type piece of work, which in the case of an MBA tends to be incredibly applied to the type of strategic issues you might be looking at in the context of your own organization, or that of one of the people that you might be working with as part of a team. You might see here, and again, that's the type of discussions you can actually have with Rupert and Katerina, or indeed as well with anybody in our counseling team, that there's different titles that we actually use. So you might notice here, I'm speaking about leading and managing the global environment, strategy and competition, operationalizing, communicating value, business, accounting, and finance, and so on. In essence, what we do quite well, in my opinion, is we package the syllabus, so all those different functional areas, into very, very, very relevant areas. So for example, leading and managing the global environment, which as you can see is divided into 2 parts. The first part, we're actually looking at a module that is very much so focused on ESG type issues. So we're looking at the transition from a shareholder-based capitalistic type system to the more inclusive stakeholder-based capitalism that looks beyond the interests of shareholder value, perhaps looking at more wider interests, anywhere from the employees to the wider communities where we operate, to the environment, and so on, which is incredibly relevant and valid to today's world, as well as looking at how we actually go about managing the transition into net zero, which pretty much every single organization is having to go through and will have to go through over the next 10 years or so. Second part of that, leading and managing the global environment, is quite focused on organizational behavior, organizational design, and HR leadership type issues. So here's where we look at organizational culture, how we go about managing transformation and organizational design, all those type of issues. Strategy and competition. First, we look at economic of strategy, and then we actually move on to looking at the third semester at strategic management course, so that helicopter view. Personalizing and communicating value. We don't tend to look at marketing and operations as distinct and separable areas, but areas that really have strong interdependencies. So the idea that anything that operations people have to do has an interplay with what marketers are doing and the other way around. And likewise with accounting and finance. So looking at the interplay between the accountancy function, which tends to perhaps looking at how we go about measuring financial value, and then creating financial value through what would be more akin to corporate finance type issues. So key tenets being looking at investment decisions, looking at financing decisions, looking at dividends decisions, and looking at metrics that we can actually use to try to make, I would say, more objective decisions as to how we go about investing, how we go about financing, and so on. Now, notice as well that underpinning it all, we have MBA Plus, which is a set of extracurricular activities that either through our international centers or here in Manchester, or our careers teams, or indeed as well type of events that at school level we actually tend to offer to our students and graduates. So it also includes our alumni. You can do from beyond the curricular side of things. And notice as well that there is a pre-MBA stage. So from the moment that our students sign up, and even before the course begins, for example, in July, we give you access to our pre-sessional courses, how you go about returning to higher education, how you go about referencing, writing essays, time management, and indeed as well, how to start getting yourself acquainted with some of the content and the curriculum that you will be covering from July onwards. So we have pre-sessionals on marketing, on operations management, on financialization, on also accountancy, and so on. And then obviously that post-MBA stage where we continue to offer you networking opportunities, and indeed, as I said earlier, that extra elective that you can take on a continuous professional development area. How about our Global Executive MBA? I think I've spoken quite a bit about it already, but in essence, is that program that is aimed perhaps at the more senior end of students, and that's reflected by the average age of the students in this pathway, if you will, of our professional MBA portfolio, which is 41. And what we're doing is we're actually delivering slightly more face-to-face in a shorter period of time. We put the individuals in our GEMBA, or Global Executive MBA program, as a close cohort to travel around the world in the form of 5 residentials represented in our Global Executive MBA. So we started actually this pathway in January 2022. So we have 3 cohorts, and we already have 35 nationalities represented in classes that are quite small. So really interesting class, and I would suggest that if you want to be looking into it in a lot more detail, you make yourselves known again to our course counseling team that can actually guide you through expectations and the exact details of the centers you would be visiting at every point in time. But in essence, the curriculum is actually similar to the extent that we still need to cover those basics of business. So we still need to cover finance, accounting, operations, marketing. You still need a strategy course, but there's small variances to the curriculum, mainly around what we call the reflective executive, which is a course that underpins the first year of your studies, that gets you as a very senior manager to reflect about the way you actually go on to make decisions. So it's quite based on decision making. And indeed as well, the digital economy, which is an elective that is available to all our global MBAs, but is actually a core course for our global executive MBAs, is a course that is actually quite focused on the effect of artificial intelligence and platform ecosystem strategies on business and on management. But as you can see, many of the courses then that you would be taking on the very first year are actually very similar to the courses that you would be taking in the standard global MBA program. Notice, as I said, that you would be starting, if you were to come in July, with 6 days in Manchester in July. You would be then taking 6 days. It's not UAE first, if you're in your July intake. That would actually be 7 days in September, October time in Singapore, and that would then be followed up by 6 days either in March or April, around Easter time next year in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates. Only then to come back to Manchester on your second year for the last 6 months of the program to take your strategy and competition workshop, as well as a briefing for your business inquiry, which replaces the live business project as a smaller course, if you will, that makes it more feasible for you to complete within 18 months, and a last intervention with the reflective executive. And then you underpin all that with 2 electives that you actually take on that third semester, again, either here in Manchester or indeed anywhere else in the world. We also give you that offer of a post-MBA elective, again, which you can take here in Manchester, indeed anywhere you want in the world, throughout or across our network of international centers. And on this point, I'm just going to stop here and pass it back to Rupert, who's going to be speaking about some of the more detailed considerations in terms of admissions, fees, and what comes with each one of the offers.